Hey, what's up, guys? All right, so making a quick video about passive and active voice while you guys are in the other room watching the president. Okay, so this is a question of style. It's not a grammar question. It's a question of usage, style, best practices in writing. There is a way of putting a sentence where the subject of the sentence is actually doing the action, and there's a way of putting a sentence where the subject of the sentence is having the action done to it. An active construction, what's called the active voice, is where the subject is doing the action. A passive construction or a passive voice is where the subject is having the action done to them. Okay, my very high-tech IT skills here. These are AV skills, audio-visual. There we go. Real simple, but active voice is what you want to shoot for. So you'll see an example here in a minute, and you may not be able to see it real good on the TV. I can't do this on my computer because my computer is old, and the camera on my phone is so much better. So I can't actually share the screen to you while I do this presentation, but I can share this doc to you, and you can kind of follow along. Okay, but an active sentence says something like this. Jen bought the book. All right. Get a little closer there. So Jen, obviously the subject. Bought, obviously the predicate or the verb. And what is the book? Well, obviously the book is the direct object. There's a way of putting this sentence in English where I can actually take the info, the noun, from the object and slide it up into the subject. That would be to make this a passive sentence. So Jen bought the book is an active in the active voice. And normally that's what you want to use, the active voice. If I wanted to put that in the passive, I would say the book. Now how could I put that action bought? Because now the book, that action, the buying, is going to happen to the book. The subject of the sentence is actually going to have is going to take that verb. That action is going to happen to it. So if I wanted to put that in the passive, I would say the book was bought by, was her name Jen? I think her name was Jen. I like the name Jen. Okay, so the book was bought by Jen. In English, you can create a passive construction by taking a linking verb. In this case, we're in the past, and the linking verb is was. Okay? And use actually the past participle of the verb itself. So instead of Jen bought the book, I can say the book was bought by Jen. I use the linking verb, the verb of being, was, and a past or past participle of the verb buy or bought. So the book was bought by Jen. In student work, lots of passive constructions like that pop up, and you want to get rid of them as soon as humanly possible. Your writing will be a lot more readable and a lot more crisp and a lot more fun. Now, you'll have to follow along with this probably on your own because I cannot get the visuals very much better than that. But at least you know that I'm really not, I'm not pretending, it's really here. Okay, so here's a passive example of a sentence, and this is the one that I'll share to you in just a minute. Not a sentence, a paragraph. The contract was canceled by the studio manager. So this is about actors losing their jobs or having their contracts changed. The contract was canceled by the studio managers. So the contract was canceled. That is in the passive. Who is doing the action? Well, the studio managers are doing the action. So if you wanted to put this in the active, you would say the studio managers canceled the contract. Same info, just in a different structure. You want the subject of the sentence, whenever possible. Are you going to come back? Maybe? Yes, you are. No, you're not. you want the subject of the sentence to be doing the action. You don't want it to be receiving the action. When it's receiving the action, it's a passive construction. Hidden behind Stoic lawyers, the messages were passed down. Okay? So the messages were passed sometimes with a passive construction, and this will be on your worksheet. Sometimes you have to supply a noun, because check this out. The messages were passed down. Okay, the messages is the noun, the subject, and were passed down is a passive way of saying what happened to the subject. But if I wanted to put it in the active, what's the problem? Well, the problem is I don't know who passed the messages down. So sometimes I actually have to make, this works obviously best on your own writing, not when you're correcting someone else's writing, but you actually have to supply a noun to make it make sense. So I would have to say, the negotiators passed down the messages. Whoever was canceling the contracts. So the people on the other side of the table passed down the messages. I would have to actually supply an active subject to get that out of the passive voice. Words like ironclad and final notice were thrust into their faces. Again, I would have to supply a subject, because who did the thrusting? I would have to say, well, the lawyers thrust words like ironclad and final notice into their faces. Voices were raised, emotions were not kept in check. So I have to supply a subject and say, whose voices were raised? Whose emotions were not kept in check? Well, if you slide down here, further down the page, you are not left to figure this out all on your own, because they've fixed it. I didn't create this example, by the way, but it's a good one. The studio managers canceled the contract. So there, it's no longer the contract was canceled in the passive. Now it's active. We have somebody actually doing it, and the contract is the direct object of the canceling. They hid behind Stoic lawyers as they who passed the message down. So the studio managers hid, and the lawyers passed the message. So now it's all in the active voice. The lawyers use words like ironclad. So instead of words being used in the passive, the lawyers are now using the words. And I don't want to bore you to death, so just slide down here to the bottom. They were exasperated and desperate. That's the actors. They called their union reps. They didn't need to act this out. They knew unemployment checks did not promise a Merry Christmas. So that whole paragraph was all in the passive, and now it's been put in the active. And you can look at those two and see how this is much more crisp. And this is what you want your writing to be. Wherever possible, you want to use the active voice. Now, in academic writing, it may sound more academic. It may sound more like professory to use the passive voice. And when students are really maybe not real confident about what they're writing, if they're writing some literary criticism type an essay like that, like we've written in our class, we're going to write more of that, they tend to fall in the passive voice. It sounds smart, it sounds learned, it sounds academic. And academics do use it, maybe more than other people, but you don't want to use it. Even when you're writing papers in college, you want them to be as crisp as possible. So wherever you can, you want to get rid of the passive voice and put it into the active. I will do one example of this with you. I'm not going to put it on screen because I don't want this video to go on ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Number one. Here, I got to pronounce this right. A Hikaru Dorodango book was brought by Tim to help Jerry find a new hobby. If anybody wants to bring in a translation of Hikaru Dorodango, we can talk about that tomorrow. A Hikaru Dorodango book was bought by Tim to help Jerry find a new hobby. Now, what is the subject of that sentence? The subject of that sentence is book, and was bought. Is that active or passive? That's passive because the verb is happening to the subject. To get that out of the passive, I would say, Tim, you can follow right along with this on your worksheet, Tim bought a Hikaru Dorodango book to help Jerry find a new hobby. See how clear it is? And there's no reversal of the verb as an action that happens to the subject. I'm getting to 10 minutes here, but I've got to fly on. Going down to number 6. Number 6 would be an example where you have to supply a subject if you're going to get it out of the passive and into the active voice. So number 6 is, in Ender's Game, Andrew is renamed Ender. To get that out of the passive and into the active, I have to say who renamed him. I can't just say dot, 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 in Ender's Game, dot, 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 renames Andrew Ender. I have to supply that information. You'll be able to do that in your own writing more easily, and you can do it in this example because you know who did that. Who renamed Andrew Ender? Class? Val. So what you would say then is in Ender's Game, Val renames, that should be in the present, not in the past, Val renames Andrew Ender. Okay? It's active. The subject does the renaming. It doesn't have the renaming done to it. So all that, 11 minutes, I hope that wasn't too much, but all of that was just to help you find your way through the worksheet. Go ahead and give that a try, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. See you then.